My daughter left me $29 million, but she also left me a war. For 10 years. Her ex-husband was a ghost, yet the scent of cash brought him back to my doorstep faster than grief ever could. He looked at me and saw a frail old woman he could easily break. He forgot that, before I was a widow, I was a mother who had survived him once already. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and at 58 years old, I had perfected the art of becoming invisible in the grey, rain-soaked town of Port Grayson, Oregon. I was just another widow in a sensible coat, the woman who bought day-old bread at the bakery and paid her utility bills 2 days early. No one looked twice at me. No one wondered about the silence that filled my small, drafty house on the edge of the cliffs. That anonymity was my armor, built layer by layer over decades of holding my breath. But this morning, a single sheet of heavy, cream-coloured bond paper had shattered it completely. It sat on my scarred oak kitchen table, looking obscenely bright against the dark wood. The letter was from a law firm in Seattle, informing me that my daughter, Clara, had left me everything. $29 million. I whispered to the empty room, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. I had to say it aloud just to test if the world would crack open. It did not. The rain kept beating against the window pane, and the kettle on the stove continued its low, rising whistle. $29 million. It was a number that belonged to people who appeared on magazine covers, not to a woman who darned her own wool socks because she could not bear the thought of waste. My phone rang, cutting through the damp air like a siren. It was Mr. Sterling, the senior partner at Blackwell & Stone. I picked up the receiver, my hand trembling just enough to notice. Mrs. Whitmore. His voice was smooth, polished, and detached. I trust you have received the courier packet by now. I have, I said, my voice sounding rustier than I intended. Mr. Sterling? There must be a mistake. Clara. She did well. I knew that. But this amount, it is accurate to the penny. He interrupted, though not unkindly. Clara was exceptionally distinctive in her investment strategies. She liquidated her entire portfolio 3 weeks before she passed. It is all cash. Mrs. Whitmore. And it is all yours. I looked at the photograph on the mantelpiece. It was one of the few I had left out. Clara was 7 years old in the picture, missing a front tooth, grinning with a ferocity that used to terrify me as much as it charmed me. We had loved each other with a desperate, jagged kind of love. I had scrubbed floors and skipped meals so she could have piano lessons she hated and math tutors she needed. I had pushed her toward a world I could not enter, and when she finally walked through those doors, she closed them behind her. We were not estranged, exactly. We were just occupants of different planets who occasionally sent weak signals across the void. Why, I asked, gripping the phone cord. She knew I don't need this. I don't want it. The will is specific, Mr. Sterling said. Then his tone shifted, becoming more guarded. However, there are conditions, unusual ones. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. This sounded more like the daughter I remembered. Clara never gave anything without a structure, a plan. She was her father's daughter in her ambition, but she was mine in her paranoia. What conditions, I asked. The assets are to be held in a blind trust under your name for exactly 90 days, Sterling explained. You cannot access a single cent until that period expires. The estate covers your basic living expenses, but the bulk principal, it is frozen And there is a specific clause regarding third-party claimants. Third-party claimants, yes. Clara included a handwritten addendum. It simply says, "Wait for the wolves." Mrs. Whitmore. Do you know what she meant by that? I stared at the rain streaking the glass. The grey ocean churned below the cliffs, violent and restless. A memory surfaced, sharp and unbidden. Clara at 22, crying in this very kitchen. Her face bruised not by a fist, but by the exhaustion of trying to please a man who consumed her light. I had told her to leave him. She had told me I didn't understand love. Mrs. Whitmore, I don't know. I lied, though my heart had begun to hammer a warning rhythm against my ribs. She was often dramatic. Very well. We will proceed with the probate. I suggest you lock your doors, Mrs. Whitmore. Money like this, it has a smell. People pick up on it. I hung up the phone. The silence of the house rushed back in, but it felt different now. It felt thin. I looked down at the letter again. $29 million, frozen for 90 days. It was not a gift. It was bait. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. It was empty, save for a delivery truck idling 2 blocks down. But for the first time in years, the solitude did not feel like safety. It felt like exposure. Clara had left me a fortune, but she had also left me a message. She knew something was coming, and she had left me standing right in its path. To understand why $29 million felt less like a lottery win and more like a loaded gun, you have to understand where we came from. I was raised in a world of calloused hands and second shifts, the daughter of a brake mechanic and a diner waitress who taught me that the only thing free in America was the air you breathed, and even that felt taxed in the city. I married young, a foolish rebellion that dissolved before the ink was dry on the certificate, leaving me with a 2-year-old Clara and a terrifying emptiness in my bank account. I spent the next 20 years at Northline Civic Services, a grey, bureaucratic agency where I filed building permits and zoning appeals under the hum of fluorescent lights. I did not have a career. I had a paycheck. Every dollar was accounted for before it hit my hand. I wore the same 3 polyester blouses for 5 years so Clara could have braces. I skipped lunch so she could go on the field trip to Washington. I pruned my own desires down to the root until there was nothing left but the singular drive to keep her fed and clothed. Clara saw the sacrifice, but she did not see the love. She saw the fear. She grew up despising the smell of our small apartment, the way I clipped coupons on Sunday mornings, the way I shrank when the landlord knocked. She wanted a world that was soft, golden, and safe. I won't live like this. Mom, she told me once when she was 16, staring at our chipped laminate countertop. I'm going to be someone. I'm going to matter. You matter to me. I had said, reaching for her hand. She had pulled away. That's not enough. The rift started there, a hairline fracture that widened into a canyon when she met Victor Hale. Clara was 24, fresh out of business school, hungry and brilliant. Victor was 30, handsome in a way that felt calculated, like a politician practiced in the mirror. He did not have money then, but he had the arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him a throne. I saw through him the moment he stepped into my living room, scanning my worn furniture with a polite, sneering disdain. He did not look at Clara with affection. He looked at her like she was an asset, a ladder he could climb. He is dangerous. Clara, I told her a month before the wedding. We were in her new apartment, a sterile place Victor had picked out. You're just jealous, Clara snapped, her eyes hard. You want me to stay small. You want me to be stuck at Northline like you. I want you to be safe, I pleaded. He talks over you. He corrects you in public. He's cutting you off from your friends. He's refining me, she countered, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. He knows how the world works. You don't know anything about his world. I was not invited to the rehearsal dinner. At the wedding, I sat in the back row, watching Victor place a hand on the small of her back. It looked possessive, a claim of ownership rather than a touch of comfort. Over the next 2 years, I watched my daughter fade. The vibrant, sharp-tongued girl I raised was replaced by a polished echo. Victor dictated what she wore, how she invested her small savings, and who she spoke to. He never hit her. He didn't have to. He simply dismantled her confidence piece by piece until she believed she was nothing without him. Then, just as abruptly as he had arrived, he vanished. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I was at Northline, staring at a stack of permit applications, when Clara called me. He's gone. She choked out, her voice so broken I barely recognized it. Who is gone? I asked, gripping the phone. Victor. He cleared the joint account. He took the car. He left a note. Mum, just a note. He had used her credit to fund a failed venture, drained her spirit. And when he realized she had no more liquidity to squeeze, he discarded her. He walked out the door and left my daughter in the wreckage of the life she had tried so hard to build. That was the last time I saw Victor Hale. Or so I thought. He had broken her heart, but he had also ignited a cold, hard rage in her that I recognized. It was the same rage that had kept me alive. He thought he had destroyed her. He had no idea he had just forged her into steel. For the next 10 years, silence became the third resident in my life. Victor had not just left. He had evaporated. There were no drunk phone calls in the middle of the night, no remorseful letters, no sightings of his face on social media profiles. He simply ceased to exist in our orbit, and for a long time, I thought that was a mercy. I did not know that silence can also be a strategy. Clara did not grieve him. Instead, she calcified. She took the rage that Victor had ignited and poured it into the only thing that could not lie to her numbers. She stopped visiting Port Grayson as often. When she did, she was distracted, her phone buzzing with alerts from markets in Tokyo and London. She never spoke of her work in detail. She just called it consulting and changed the subject. There was a brief, flickering moment, about 3 years after the divorce, when I thought she might soften. She started seeing a man named David, a widower with a 4-year-old daughter named Sophie. For 6 months. I was a grandmother in practice, if not by blood. I watched Sophie on weekends while Clara and David worked. I baked cookies I knew I shouldn't eat and read bedtime stories that made my throat tight. I saw Clara smile, really smile for the first time since her wedding day. Then it ended, abruptly, coldly. It didn't work out. Mom? Clara told me over the phone one evening, her voice devoid of tears. But, Sophie? I asked, my hand tightening on the receiver. She called me Nana last week. You can't just, it's over. She cut me off. And I heard the steel door slam shut in her tone. I can't rely on people. Mom. People leave. Assets don't. After that. Clara built a fortress. She moved to a high-rise in Seattle. but she drove a 5-year-old sedan and wore clothes that were neat but nondescript. She never mentioned money. I assumed she was comfortable, perhaps making a manager's salary. I had no idea she was quietly building an empire. I had no idea she was becoming a whisper in the financial world, a ghost investor who moved millions with a keystroke while sitting in a dark apartment. We drifted into a rhythm of low expectations. We spoke on Sundays. We talked about the weather, my garden, the rising cost of heating oil. We never talked about Victor. We never talked about the empty space where a family should be. And then the sickness came. It was aggressive and cruel, stealing her from me in less than 4 months. By the time I realized how sick she was already in hospice. I sat by her bedside in those final days, holding a hand that felt like fragile parchment. The room was sterile, filled with the hum of machines that cost more than my house. Even dying. Clara was planning. She had a laptop open until she could no longer lift her fingers. I fixed it. "Mom," she whispered one afternoon, her breath rattling in her chest. "The will. I changed it. Again? Don't worry about that." I soothed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Just rest." "No," she insisted, her eyes opening, fever bright and terrifyingly lucid. "He might come back. If he smells the money, he might come back." Who, I asked, though I knew. "Victor," she wheezed. I left a trap, but you have to be strong. Promise me. Promise me you won't let him take it." "He's gone?" "Clara," I said softly. "He's been gone for 10 years?" "He's a shark," she murmured, her eyes drifting shut. "Sharks always come when there's blood in the water." She died 2 days later. I buried my only child on a Tuesday, under a grey Oregon sky that seemed to weep with me. I stood by the grave alone, save for the lawyer and a few distant colleagues. I thought the worst pain was over. I thought the tragedy was that she had died young and alone. I did not know that she had spent her final breaths preparing me for a war I didn't even know I was fighting. I went home to my quiet house, washed a single plate, and went to sleep, believing I had nothing left to lose. I was wrong. The game was just starting. The elevator ride to the 44th floor of Blackwell and Stone felt less like an ascent and more like being sealed into a pressurized chamber. The doors slid open to reveal a lobby that smelled of expensive leather and intimidated silence. I clutched my handbag against my chest, feeling painfully out of place in my wool cardigan among the sharp suits and glass walls. Mr. Sterling was waiting for me in a corner office that overlooked the grey sprawl of the city. He did not offer me coffee or condolences this time. He simply gestured to a leather chair and opened a thick file folder on his mahogany desk. "Let us not waste time. Mrs. Whitmore," Sterling said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the polished wood. "The total valuation of Clara's estate, after liquidating her positions in Tokyo and New York, stands at $29,412,000. I stared at the paper. The number was typed out in bold, black ink. It looked like a phone number, not a bank balance. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice sounding thin in the large room. "Clara drove a 5-year-old sedan. She lived in a rental. How did she—" "Clara was a ghost investor," Sterling explained, his tone clinical. "She moved capital for startups that couldn't get bank loans but had high potential. She took equity instead of fees. She was brilliant. Mrs. Whitmore. And she was ruthless with her savings." He turned the page. You are the sole beneficiary. There are no charities, no other relatives, no secret lovers. It is all yours. The commercial real estate in Austin, the tech shares, the bonds, everything. I felt a wave of nausea instead of gratitude. It was too much. It was a weight I could not carry. But there is a condition, Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave. He tapped a paragraph highlighted in yellow. The entirety of the estate is subject to a 90-day freeze. You cannot access the funds, sell the assets, or transfer a single dollar until 3 months have passed from the date of death. Why, I asked. Is it taxes? No? Sterling said, locking eyes with me. It is a defensive strategy. Clara called it the siege protocol. She anticipated that the moment her death became public record, certain parties might emerge to lay claim to her estate. The 90-day window forces them to show their hand before the money is dispersed. He flipped to the next page. And that brings us to Clause 7b. I leaned forward, squinting at the dense legal text. It reads, in the event that Victor Hale attempts to contest this will, claim spousal support based on prior agreements, or assert rights over intellectual property, the estate is instructed to release the sealed evidence file to the district attorney. My blood ran cold. The name hung in the air like a curse. Victor, I whispered, my hands starting to shake. He's been gone for 10 years. We haven't heard a whisper. Why would she write him into her will? Because Clara believed he was watching. Sterling said grimly. She believed that he was waiting for her to die. This clause isn't just a legal instruction. Mrs. Whitmore, it is a warning shot. She knew something we didn't. I sat back, the leather creaking beneath me. This was not a gift. Clara had not left me a fortune to enjoy my retirement. She had left me a weapon because she knew I was about to be attacked. She had spent her final, dying months not making peace with God, but building a legal fortress to protect me from the man who had broken her. Is he coming? I asked, the question escaping my lips before I could stop it. Do you think he knows Sterling closed the folder? The sound was like a gavel striking a block. The obituary was published yesterday in the national papers. Sterling said quietly, if he is out there, he knows. The 90-day clock started this morning. If Victor Hale is going to make a move, it will be soon. I walked out of the building and into the cold drizzle. The city looked different now. Every face in the crowd seemed sharper, every shadow darker. I clutched my coat tighter, but the chill wasn't coming from the wind. It was coming from the realization that my daughter's death was not the end of the story. It was the opening move in a game I didn't know how to play. Was he out there? Was he reading the same newspaper, calculating the same dates for the first time in 10 years? I looked over my shoulder, and I knew, with a mother's terrified instinct, that I was no longer alone. 3 days later, he appeared. I was deadheading the roses in the front yard, the shears clicking with a rhythmic, satisfying snap, when a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. It was a luxury model, but I noticed immediately that it was a rental. The barcode sticker was still visible on the side window. Victor Hale stepped out. 10 years had eroded him. The man who had walked out on my daughter was a golden boy, sharp-jawed and radiating an arrogant vitality. The man walking up my path now was a fading copy. His hair was thinning at the temples, dyed a shade of brown that was too dark to be natural, and his suit, while expensive, hung loosely on a frame that had lost its muscle. But the eyes were the same. They were flat, predatory discs of blue that assessed the value of everything they touched. He stopped at the edge of the porch, flashing a smile that didn't reach those eyes. "Hello, Eleanor," he said. His voice was smoother than I remembered, practiced. It has been a long time. I did not put down the shears. I simply stood there, wiping a gloved hand on my apron. 10 years. Victor, give or take a lifetime. He sighed, a theatrical exhale meant to convey shared sorrow. I heard about Clara. I can't tell you how devastated I was. I know we had our differences, but she was the love of my life. You have a strange way of showing love, I said, my voice steady, mostly by draining bank accounts and vanishing. Victor chuckled, a dry sound. He took a step closer, invading my space. We were young, Eleanor. Mistakes were made, but I never stopped caring. I'm here because I want to help. I know about the estate, the papers, they talk. The papers talk, I repeated. And you listened. $29 million, Victor said, the number rolling off his tongue like a prayer. That is a lot of responsibility for a woman of your situation. Managing a portfolio like that requires expertise, complex tax structures, risk management. Clara would have wanted someone who understands the game to handle it. She would have wanted me to step in. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fraying threads on his shirt cuff. I saw the way his eyes darted to the front door, as if assessing the value of the furniture inside. He wasn't a conqueror returning for his spoils. He was a desperate man looking for a lifeline. You are broke, aren't you? I asked. It wasn't a question. It was an observation. Victor stiffened. The smile vanished, replaced by a flash of the cruelty I remembered. I am in a temporary liquidity crunch, but I have rights. Eleanor, I was part of the foundation. I helped her build the initial strategy. I have emails. I have verbal contracts from before the divorce that were never nullified. You have nothing, I said. I will sue, he hissed, stepping onto the first stair of the porch. I will tie this estate up in litigation for 20 years. I will bleed that trust dry with legal fees. I will drag Clara's name through every tabloid in the state. I'll tell them she was mentally unstable. I'll tell them she stole my intellectual property. Do you want her legacy to be a scandal? Or do you want to cut a deal? He towered over me, using his height as a weapon, just as he used to do with Clara. He expected me to flinch. He expected the quiet, invisible Eleanor who served tea and looked at the floor. But I was not that woman anymore. I was the woman holding the shears. You think I am afraid of a scandal? I asked softly. I have buried my husband. I have buried my child. I have nothing left that you can hurt. Don't be stupid, Victor snarled, his face flushing red. You're just a placeholder, a caretaker. That money belongs to the people who know how to use it. You're just an old woman waiting to die. I stepped forward, the metal tip of the shears glinting in the sunlight, just inches from his chest. I didn't raise them, but I didn't lower them either. Clara didn't leave me the money because I know how to invest it. Victor, I said, my voice cold and hard as the stone path beneath us. She left it to me because she knew I was the only one who wouldn't give you a single dime to save your life. Victor recoiled as if I had slapped him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The mask of control shattered, revealing the panicked small man underneath. He looked at the shears, then at my eyes, and he realized for the first time that he had miscalculated. Get off my property, I said, You'll hear from my lawyer tomorrow morning." He spat, backing away, his hands trembling with rage. "This isn't over. I'll take everything. Bring him," I called out as he retreated to his rental car. "I have a very good lawyer. And unlike you, Victor, I can afford him." He slammed the car door so hard the vehicle shook as he peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying across the lawn. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was the icy, calm clarity of a soldier who has just seen the enemy's face and realized they are human, mortal, and beatable. I went back to my roses. The war had officially begun. That night, I did not sleep. Instead, I opened the heavy, sealed box that Mr. Sterling had given me after our first meeting, the one labelled with nothing but a black Sharpie letter, V. I sat at my kitchen table with a pot of strong coffee and began to read. What I found inside made my blood run cold, not with fear, but with a profound, aching realization of just how much my daughter had shielded me. Clara had not just been investing in stocks, she had been investing in surveillance. The box contained 5 years of reports from a private investigator based in Chicago. There were photographs of Victor meeting with men who looked like they broke kneecaps for a living. There were bank statements obtained through means I did not want to question. There were transcripts of emails Victor had sent to Clara, emails I never knew existed begging for money, then demanding it, then threatening to hurt me if she did not pay up. "Oh, Clara," I whispered to the empty room, my hand trembling as I touched a printout. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you carry this alone?" She had kept him at bay with silence and legal threats, never letting his poison touch my quiet life in Port Grayson. But the most damning evidence was in the financial analysis. Victor was not just broke, he was a criminal. He had been running a Ponzi scheme disguised as a boutique hedge fund. He had taken money from doctors and retirees, promised them 20% returns, and spent it on leased cars and high-stakes poker games. The scheme had collapsed 6 months ago. He was drowning, and Clara's inheritance was the only life raft he could see. The next morning, I was back in Mr. Sterling's office. I placed the files on his desk. "He is not here for his share," I said, my voice steady. "He is here because he is about to go to prison." Sterling nodded, looking less like a lawyer and more like a general reviewing a battle map. "We suspected as much. But this confirms it. Clara knew he was operating a fraud. She documented every wire transfer, every fake ledger entry. So, why didn't she turn him in? I asked. "Leverage?" Sterling said simply. "As long as he stayed away from you." She kept the file closed. It was a stalemate, but she knew that once she was gone, the stalemate would end. That is why the will is structured this way. He opened the legal document to the clause we had discussed before. "It is a trigger mechanism, Mrs. Whitmore," Sterling explained. "If Victor files a formal contest to the will, he enters the public record. Under the terms of the trust, that action automatically authorizes us to release these files to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the district attorney. He thinks he is filing a lawsuit. In reality, he will be signing his own arrest warrant." I sat back, stunned by the cold, brilliant geometry of my daughter's mind. She had turned her death into a trap. "Does he know I asked?" "No," Sterling replied. "He thinks he is dealing with a grieving mother who doesn't understand finance. He thinks he can bully you into a settlement to avoid a scandal. He has no idea that we are holding a nuclear option." Sterling leaned forward, his expression serious. "However, I must warn you, If we trigger this, it will get ugly. The press will descend. Victor will scream and lie before he goes down. He will try to drag Clara's name through the mud. Most clients in your position would offer a small settlement just to make him go away quietly. $50,000, maybe $100,000. It is often easier. I thought about Victor standing on my porch, sneering at my home. I thought about Clara dying in that hospital bed, worried about me until her final breath. I thought about the 10 years of silence while he lived off stolen money, and my daughter built an empire out of sheer will. Easier, I repeated. It is the path of least resistance, Sterling said. We cut him a check. He signs a non-disclosure agreement, and he disappears. I stood up and walked to the window. The city below looked small, manageable. I wasn't the woman who filed permits at Northline Civic Services anymore. I was the keeper of Clara's legacy. No, I said. Sterling paused. No, not a penny. I turned to face him. He called me an old woman waiting to die. He thinks I am weak. If I pay him, I prove him right. I don't want him to go away. Mr. Sterling, I want him to pay for every sleepless night he gave my daughter. It will be a war, Sterling warned, though I saw a glint of approval in his eyes. Then let it be a war, I said, picking up my purse. He wants to sue me. Let him sue. Let him drag us into court. I want to look him in the eye when the trap snaps shut. Very well, Sterling said, reaching for his phone. I will prepare the filing. We will not offer a settlement. We will wait for him to strike. I walked out of the office with a strange lightness in my step. I had spent my life being afraid of poverty, afraid of loneliness, afraid of conflict. But fear requires something to lose. And looking at those files, I realized I had already lost the only thing that mattered. Victor Hale wasn't fighting a victim. He was fighting a woman who had nothing left but the truth, and 29 million reasons to make sure he heard it. Victor filed the lawsuit on a rainy Tuesday morning, precisely 48 hours after I ordered him off my porch. It was an aggressive, sprawling legal complaint that claimed everything from undue influence to mental incompetence on my part. He didn't just want a share. He wanted control of the entire trust, arguing that he was the rightful architect of Clara's financial strategy and that I was merely a senile obstacle. Then came the media. It started with a local blog in Port Grayson, but quickly spiraled into the state news cycle. A story about a $29 million fortune and a grieving, handsome ex-husband fighting a reclusive mother was too juicy to ignore. Victor played his part perfectly. He appeared on the evening news, wearing a somber black suit, his voice breaking at just the right moments. I just want to protect Clara's legacy, he told the reporter, looking earnestly into the camera. Eleanor, she is a sweet woman, but she is overwhelmed. She doesn't understand the complexity of these assets. I just want to help. I watched him from my living room, sipping tea. The volume turned low. I did not issue a statement. I did not call the reporters camping at the bottom of my driveway. Silence was not passivity. It was bait. Victor mistook my quiet for fear, and that emboldened him to talk more, to lie more, and to dig a hole so deep he would never climb out. While Victor was busy courting the cameras, Mr. Sterling was busy filing our response. We didn't argue with his claims in the press. We argued with paper in the courtroom. We began submitting the evidence Clara had gathered, piece by piece, layer by layer. The first hearing was 2 weeks later at the county courthouse. The room was packed with journalists and curious locals. When I walked in, I saw Victor sitting at the plaintiff's table. He looked triumphant, flanked by a high-priced attorney who looked like he charged by the minute. Victor leaned over to his lawyer, whispering something and smirking in my direction. He thought he had already won the court of public opinion. I sat down next to Mr. Sterling, smoothed my skirt, and folded my hands. I did not look at the cameras. I looked straight at the judge. The proceedings began with Victor's lawyer launching into a theatrical opening statement about fairness and the historical context of the assets. He spoke for 20 minutes, painting Victor as a financial genius who had been wrongfully cut out. When it was Mr. Sterling's turn, he stood up slowly. He did not make a speech. He simply picked up a thick binder. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice calm and carrying to the back of the room. "We are not here to debate the sentimental history of the marriage. We are here to discuss the plaintiff's standing. We are submitting a motion to dismiss based on unclean hands, supported by Exhibit A and Exhibit B." He handed the binder to the bailiff. Victor frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. He leaned toward his lawyer again. "What is that?" I heard him whisper loudly. "What did they submit?" His lawyer opened the copy on their desk. I watched the lawyer's face carefully. He was a professional, used to bluffs and posturing, but as he turned the pages, his colour drained away. He stopped reading, his finger hovering over a line on the second page. It was a forensic accounting of the initial seed money Victor claimed to have provided money that Clara's records proved he had actually stolen from a joint account 10 years ago. This isn't relevant," Victor's lawyer stammered, standing up, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your Honor, these are old allegations. They are dated bank records signed by your client," Sterling countered smoothly. "And if you turn to tab 4, you will see a sworn affidavit from the private investigator regarding Mr. Hale's current liquidity issues, which directly contradicts the financial disclosure he filed with this court 3 days ago." The air in the room shifted. The journalist stopped typing. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, began to flip through the binder with increasing interest. Victor grabbed the binder from his lawyer's hands. His eyes scanned the pages, and I saw the moment the realization hit him. He saw the dates. He saw the transaction numbers. He saw the emails he thought were deleted. He looked up, and for the first time, he didn't look at the judge or the cameras. He looked at me. I met his gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the absolute, crushing weight of the truth. In my eyes, he saw the answer to the question he had been too arrogant to ask. Clara hadn't just left me money. She had left me the receipt for his soul. "This is a fabrication," Victor hissed. But his voice cracked. She forged this." His lawyer pulled him back down into his seat, hissing something urgent into his ear. I could see the lawyer inching his chair slightly away from Victor, creating a physical distance between himself and a client who had just become a liability. "Mr. Hale, control yourself," the judge warned, looking over her spectacles. "These documents are quite specific. Counsel, I need time to review this new evidence in chambers. It appears the complexity of this case has just increased significantly." "Your Honor." "I object," Victor shouted, standing up again, sweat visible on his forehead. "You can't. We need a recess. My lawyer needs to explain. Sit down." "Mr. Hale?" the judge snapped, slamming her gavel. "We are adjourned until tomorrow morning, and I suggest you use that time to review your own filings." The gavel strike echoed like a gunshot. Victor stood frozen. his hands gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. He looked around the room, but the admiration was gone. The reporters were whispering, looking at him with suspicion instead of sympathy. He turned to me one last time, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible panic. He finally understood that he hadn't walked into a payday. He had walked into a slaughter. The unravelling happened faster than I could have imagined. By the time the sun rose over Port Grayson the next morning, the narrative had flipped. The evidence we submitted had entered the public record, and with it, the facade of Victor Hale crumbled into dust. It was not just about my daughter's money anymore. Clara's files contained proof of wire fraud dating back 3 years involving a shell company in Nevada and a list of investors he had bled dry. Mr. Sterling called me at 9 in the morning. It is out of our hands. Eleanor, he said, his voice grim but satisfied. The district attorney picked up the file. And I have heard from a contact at the FBI. They are opening a parallel investigation based on the Ponzi scheme data. The civil suit is effectively dead. Does he know I asked? He knows, Sterling replied. His lawyer resigned an hour ago. No ethical attorney will touch a client who lied to the court on a sworn affidavit. The civil suit, the battle for the $29 million, suddenly looked like a petty squabble next to the looming threat of federal prison. The reporters who had been camping on my lawn vanished. I saw them later on the news, swarming the steps of Victor's hotel, shouting questions about embezzlement and grand larceny. He looked pale, sweating through his expensive suit. Shoving a camera away with a hand that shook violently, he wasn't the victimized ex-husband anymore. He was a shark thrashing on the deck. He tried to reach me. My phone began to ring incessantly. Unknown numbers, blocked IDs, then a voicemail. I listened to it once, standing in the safety of my kitchen. Eleanor, please. You have to stop them. I can explain. It's a misunderstanding. If you just drop the evidence, we can work something out. I'm begging you. Don't do this to me. His voice was a jagged ruin of the smooth baritone he had used on my porch just days ago. It was the sound of a man watching the walls close in. I deleted the message without a word. I instructed Sterling to block all communication. There would be no meeting. There would be no deal. Then came the final turn of the screw. We were meeting in Sterling's office to prepare for the final dismissal hearing the next day. Sterling opened the will to the very last page, a section we had not discussed in detail. There is one more thing you need to understand about Clara's design, Sterling said. She anticipated that Victor might try to use the lawsuit as leverage to force a settlement. He might think that even with the fraud exposed, you would pay him a few million just to end the legal headache and unlock the funds. He does think that, I said. He thinks everyone has a price. Well, he is wrong, Sterling said, tapping the document with his pen. Look at this clause. The trust dictates that the $29 million can only be released to you upon the final legal resolution of any contesting claims. That means, as long as his lawsuit exists, the money is locked. But more importantly, the trustee that is me is explicitly forbidden from authorizing any settlements to a contesting party. If we pay him a single dime, the entire estate is donated to the state of Oregon. I stared at the words. It was brilliant and terrifying. So I couldn't pay him off, even if I wanted to. I asked, exactly. Sterling smiled, a cold, sharp expression. Clara burned the bridge. Victor has no leverage. He is holding a grenade, and he can't throw it at you because you are behind a wall of glass. He has to hold it until it explodes. Victor was trapped. If he continued the lawsuit, he exposed himself to more criminal scrutiny and got nothing. If he dropped the lawsuit, he admitted defeat and walked away with nothing but a looming prison sentence. He had come for a fortune. But my daughter had ensured that the only thing he would leave with was handcuffs. The air in the city felt heavy, charged with the electricity of a storm about to break. We were going back to court tomorrow for the final blow, and for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't dreading seeing him. I was looking forward to it. The final hearing took place on a Thursday morning, under a sky the colour of bruised iron. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. Victor sat alone at the plaintiff's table. His high-priced legal team had vanished, likely cutting their losses the moment the fraud allegations hit the news cycle. He was left with a court-appointed public defender who looked young enough to be my grandson and terrified to be there. When I walked past his table, Victor looked up. The transformation was complete. The arrogant, golden boy who had stood on my porch was gone. In his place was a man hollowed out by fear. "Eleanor," he rasped, his voice cracking. I didn't mean for it to get this ugly. I just wanted what was fair. Please, tell them to stop." I stopped and looked down at him. I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Clara's face in that hospital bed. "Fairness is a luxury, Victor," I said quietly, "and you spent yours a long time ago." The judge entered, a stern woman with grey hair pulled back in a severe bun. She moved through the preliminaries with the efficiency of a butcher sharpening a knife. When the time came for statements, Mr. Sterling nodded to me. I stood up. My knees did not shake. I walked to the podium and adjusted the microphone, the metal cold against my fingers. I did not look at the cameras lining the back of the room. I looked only at the judge. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, "do you have anything to add before I issue my ruling?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was steady, louder than I expected. For 10 years, I thought my daughter was distant because she was ashamed of me. I thought she stayed away because I was a reminder of a life she wanted to escape. But I was wrong. She stayed away to build a wall. I paused, taking a breath that tasted of dust and justice. Victor Hale thinks this is about money. He thinks $29 million is a prize he earned by breaking her heart. But he is wrong. That money isn't a fortune. It is a weapon. Clara knew he would come back. She knew that a man who feeds on others never stops being hungry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, yellowed piece of notepaper that had been clipped to the very back of the binder Mr. Sterling gave me. "My daughter left me a final instruction," I said, unfolding the paper. She wrote, "Mom, if you are reading this, the wolf is at the door. He will look like he is sorry. He will say he has changed. Do not listen. He is not here to love you. He is here to eat. Starve him." A silence fell over the courtroom, heavy and absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when the truth is so naked it feels violent. Victor slumped in his chair, his face buried in his hands. He made a sound, a low keen that might have been a sob. But no one moved to comfort him. The reporters had stopped typing. The stenographer's hands hovered over her keys. "I am just doing what my daughter asked," I finished, folding the paper back up. "I am starving the wolf." I sat down. The judge looked at me for a long moment, her expression softening just a fraction. Before she turned her gaze to Victor, it hardened instantly into stone. Mr. Hale, the judge said, her voice cutting through the silence like a gavel strike. The court finds your claims to be entirely without merit. Your petition is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, based on the evidence of systemic financial fraud submitted to this court, I am remanding you into the custody of the federal marshals pending arraignment. Victor didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just sat there, collapsed inward, as two marshals stepped forward with handcuffs. The metal clicked shut, a sharp, final sound that echoed in the quiet room. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I watched them pull him to his feet and lead him toward the side door. As he passed me, he looked up, and our eyes met one last time. There was no anger left in him, only the terrified realization that he had underestimated the one person he thought he could ignore. The door closed behind him. The room exhaled. Mr. Sterling touched my arm gently. It is done. Eleanor, he whispered. Not yet, I said, staring at the closed door. But we are close. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. I walked out of the courtroom with my head high, ignoring the shouted questions from the press. The air outside was cold, but for the first time in months, it felt clean. I had faced the past, and I had buried it. Now, I just had to figure out what to do with the future. The gavel struck the wood with a sound that felt like a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. The court rules in favor of the defendant, the judge declared, her voice echoing in the emptying chamber. The freeze on the Whitmore estate is lifted effective immediately. Mrs. Whitmore, you are the sole legal owner of all assets, properties, and holdings previously belonging to your daughter? I did not weep. I did not collapse in relief. I simply nodded, feeling a strange, hollow lightness in my chest. Victor was already gone, transported to a federal holding facility where he would trade his Italian suits for an orange jumpsuit. The news reports later that evening said he was facing up to 20 years for wire fraud and embezzlement. He would be an old man by the time he saw the sky without bars across it. He was no longer my problem. He was history. Mr. Sterling walked me to my car. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the pavement slick and black. So, Sterling said, leaning against the doorframe. $29 million. It is a lot of power. Eleanor, what is the plan? Tahiti, a villa in France. I looked at the skyline, thinking of Clara. I thought of the years she spent hoarding every penny, terrified that poverty would catch up to her, terrified that a man would take it all away. She had died protecting this fortune. But money without a purpose is just paper. No, I said firmly. I don't want a villa. I want to make sure no other girl has to stay in a marriage because she can't afford to leave. I want to set up a foundation. Sterling raised an eyebrow, pulling a notepad from his pocket. Go on. The Clara Whitmore Initiative, I said, the name tasting right on my tongue. We will provide legal aid and financial grants to women escaping abusive financial control. We will teach them how to invest, how to save, how to be shark-proof. I want to put $5 million into it to start. And the rest, I said, opening the car door, is for me to find out who Eleanor Whitmore is when she isn't being a wife, a mother, or a widow. 2 weeks later, the for sale sign went up in front of my house in Port Grayson. I packed 40 years of memories into 12 cardboard boxes. I left the old furniture. I left the ghosts in the hallway. I bought a small, sturdy condominium in Seattle, close to the water but far from the shadows of my past. I started taking art history classes. I joined a garden club that didn't care about my past. I stopped wearing grey. I am 58 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am not invisible. When I walk into a room, I hold my head high. I am not just a wealthy woman. I am the woman who stared down a wolf and didn't blink. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Victor sitting in his cell. I wonder if he replays that moment on my porch. I wonder if he realizes where he went wrong. He looked at my white hair and my sensible shoes, and he saw a victim. He saw prey. He forgot the one fundamental truth of nature that every predator should know. You can mess with a bank. You can mess with the law. But you never, ever mess with a mother who has nothing left to lose. He thought he was fighting an old woman. He didn't know he was fighting a war that ended before he even stepped onto the battlefield. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm really curious to know where you guys are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Nora Revenge Stories, hitting that like button, and pressing the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.